Yeah. Okay, so I'm meeting with Sarah today, and if you'd like to share what it is exactly you do and how it could be related to Charcot-Marie Tooth disease.
So my name's Sarah Jones. I'm a certified pedorthist here in Canada, and my primary role within helping people with Charcot-Marie Tooth disease is finding balance, essentially balance within their footwear and with inside the shoe and outside the shoe in order to ensure that the body sits in what we call a neutral position. So there's no pressures on any one spot, and we can enable as normal a gait cycle as we possibly can.
Right.
Yeah.
So within that, what exactly about the foot of a Charcot-Marie Tooth person is different than that of a normal person's foot?
Okay, so a Charcot-Marie Tooth foot, or feet, because you never typically have one, you got a pair, is typically classified by an extremely high arched foot with an inability to dorsiflex, or essentially pull your toes up towards your shins really easily. There's loss of muscle mass in the calf and the thigh at times, and severely clawed toes typically.
Right.
And then loss of fat padding as well. So on some people we do see quite a bit of atrophy of the pads at the bottom of the feet. So cushioning those feet is important.
And what can be done about this to make the person's life easier and more comfortable?
So my job is to make that happen, and that's often by creating inserts that cushion, pad, and protect, but also support and give a lot of structural support to balance angles within the foot and ankle.
Right.
We call it offloading to, if there's prominences on the bottom of the feet, to make sure that those spots don't take too much pressure. That's really important, especially if there's a loss of fat padding.
Is there anything people with CMT can do themselves, like exercises or things that they can focus on day to day to try to correct some things themselves?
It's more of a management as opposed to correction. Okay, because lots of people, there's lots of people that don't have CMT that have really high arched feet. High arched feet actually is the rarity in the foot style for the entire human population. But the biggest thing is making sure shoes have heels on them, shoes have lots of padding, and that they're quite stable. Lots of lacing for adaptation. Slip-ons are typically not your best friend, and often are, they're not actually wearable. People just can't keep them on their feet with CMT. So that usually kind of precludes that. But, not wearing flip-flops, or if you're going to wear something, for women it's a little bit easier. It's got to have a little bit of a wedge or a high heel on it.
Right.
And lots of cushioning. So being, careful with what you purchase. As for exercise and stretching, calf stretching I think would be one of the biggest things that people with CMT can work on, is working on stretching those calf muscles out and their hamstrings, which are the muscles that make up the back of the thigh.
Right.
Okay. And then working on their muscles that essentially pull their toes up towards them. So toe pulls to lift the foot. Those would be some of the bigger things. And then some of the other things are actual core stability exercises. So hip and pelvis exercises. Those are incredibly important for our balance. And a lot of those muscles actually come down onto the leg, and they pull up on our bones of our legs.
Really?
And so that really helps stabilize and increase our balance. So I'm a big proponent of balance exercises focused at the hip and pelvis.
At what point would surgery be considered a good idea?
Ooh. Surgery, now I'm not a surgeon, but surgery typically, I've seen that when contracture is so severe that we cannot keep people in footwear, that callousing is incredibly severe at the forefoot. So sometimes people will, or surgeons may do Achilles tendon lengthenings. Sometimes they will do some structural work on the foot, but I would say that is a very individual decision, and each case is very different because, depending on how the foot's shaped and the angles that are present, and the general overall health of the individual, whether they would be candidates for surgery too, there's not one deciding factor of when surgery would be, I don't think, would be appropriate or not appropriate.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other extreme for CMT feet is extremely flat feet. Are there any differences for care or things that they should be doing?
So the other is an extremely flat foot, and there are some differences, definitely, but there are some similarities too. So with an extremely flat foot, often you still need a little bit of a heel on a piece of footwear. Okay, so because the foot becomes what we call a rocker foot. So if you think of it almost like the bottom of a boat, right? To get the heel down to the ground and take pressure off of the middle of the foot, you need a little bit of a heel to put underneath that to help balance that. The other things that are important in that is actually to have footwear that is very wide based, that comes underneath almost the entire foot. So if you think of your foot in that case like a plate that you're trying to put on a shelf, and the shoe being the shelf, if the shelf is really narrow, the plate falls off the shelf. So the shoe has to be quite wide, inside and outside, to stabilize the entire foot. The other thing when you've got really flat feet is also having what we call toe rocker on shoes. So shoes that have quite a bit of curvature at the front, because often ankle range of motion is lost in a different position relative to somebody with a really high arched foot. So the shoe has quite a bit of toe spring, and it rolls your foot forward. Okay, so the shoe is doing more work for you than the foot is actually doing. And the goal in both cases, whether it's a high arched foot or a really low arched foot, is to get the shoes and the orthotics to do more work for you than the foot has to do all on its own. So we're taking load off the system.
Is it possible to gain more range of motion and kind of reverse foot drop a little bit through slowly over time taking away height in the heel?
Good question. To be honest with you, I've never seen that happen. And I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. There, in theory, yes. But there are some structural changes, especially when you've got really high arched feet. The whether you've got CMT or not, if you've got a really high arched foot, you need a higher heel on your shoes to keep the foot balanced. So, some people will be able to accommodate a little bit less of a heel height. But to go completely flat, that's not going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not something that can be completely resolved through stretching. Yeah, that requirement.
And then I remember there was a past conversation we had that was about high arched feet in children.
Right.
So what are things people should be looking out for in younger kids to kind of indicate that there's something more going on that they should be looking into?
Well, that's just it, actually. High arches in kids. So, when we are born with essentially very few bones in our feet, and what we do have are very soft, malleable. If you look at them on X-ray, they're almost shadows and kind of generalized shapes. That foot is flat for a very long period of time, and those bones start to develop as we start to walk. Mm-hmm. But even then, they are still very soft because they're growing. They're growing very quickly, and our feet are the first things to stop growing, okay? Because we need them to balance our height as we grow up through our teen years. So if your child has high arched feet, that is an indicator that something is not quite right. If they have low arched feet, then don't worry about it until there's a problem to a certain extent. Now, but you need to be vigilant. Mm-hmm. If your child is complaining that they don't want to walk, they don't want to participate, they're struggling, then it is time to check in with your pediatrician and your general physician and have, have them have a look, right? It might be their feet, it might not. But developmentally, we have flat feet for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. And if you're starting to hit the 7, 8, and the feet are still really flat, it's not the end of the world, right? That's not. Lots of people live with flat feet. I do. But if they're causing pain, then then we need to think about intervening. If it's causing a disruption in the child's life, then we need to intervene. Mm-hmm. But any child with really high arched feet, that needs to be checked.
What else other than CMT could that possibly be?
Okay.
What are the more common things?
So CMT is actually probably one of the more common issues with that. Mm-hmm. And there are a few other neurological multiple sclerosis kind of issues that kind of come with that, but CMT is actually probably the most common. And after that, that's a good question for a pediatrician, actually.
Okay.
To be honest with you. Because, I can't come up with one right now.
All right. Yeah. I'll remember that then.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that's all I have for today. If there's anything else you feel like should be said.
No, I think you've asked some really engaging questions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for talking to me today about this. And then turn that